And we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Lulu Freistadt. I am the Executive Director of Smart Elections, and I have with me our co-host.
Hello, everybody. I'm Benny Smith, and I'm the Technical Advisor for Smart Elections. Welcome.
Benny is also an election commissioner in Shelby County, Tennessee. And why do you leave that out? It's fairly important.
True. I'm really.
And he's also a software developer, quite a talented one. So we have a really great show for you today. Just to get us started, Smart Elections is a project that is dedicated to elevating election reform to an urgent national priority. And what we're going to be talking about today are freedom of information requests. They are a really important part of public oversight. And I wanted to just lay out kind of a broad overview. This is something we've been talking about in terms of our mission statement at Smart Elections. We have 4 kind of main pillars to the work that we're doing. One are the rules of the road. That is generally legislation and regulation that are controlling how we perform our elections. Right now, there are a lot of different pieces of legislation on the table, in particular HR 1, which is a big federal piece of legislation, very ambitious, also going to be introduced into the Senate as S1. So that's the rules of the road, that's legislation. Then we have the equipment that we vote on. That is a second pillar. The third pillar, something that Benny has to work with a lot as an election administrator, and that is process, procedures, and chain of custody. We haven't really gotten into that yet, but later in the spring, we'll be getting into that. And then what we're talking about today is one of the main pillars of one of the main legs of the fourth pillar, which is public oversight. And one of the ways that the public has oversight over elections is through public records requests. And I am very excited today to introduce Jason Leopold to you. He is a senior investigative reporter at BuzzFeed News. He's also been inducted into the Freedom of Information Hall of Fame and has had his work featured in many publications, the New York Times, as well as CNN and other major media outlets like 60 Minutes. And he's also been called a freedom of information terrorist because his work is so assertive in terms of getting that information. So we're going to dive right into it. We're going to talk to him about his work and how to really do a freedom of information request and have it be effective. And before we do that, I just want to check in with you, Benny, because when you and I were talking about this, one of the things that you mentioned was that when you became an election commissioner, they kind of gave you some training about how to respond to public records requests and how to perhaps avoid them. So I was really interested in you telling us about that. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I'm a part of this group. It's called the Tennessee Association of County Election Officials. And in 2019, when I became an election official, they gave us a how-to of dealing in Tennessee. We have an Office of Open Records Counsel, as well as our Tennessee Open Meetings and Open Records Acts. And basically, they give us a to-do list of what constitutes an open record, what constitutes an exception to a record, the things that can happen to trigger something that is restricted to now become an open record. And basically, if you don't want a record created, then if you don't want to be subject to an open record, then don't create one. So they really advise us to talk. So it's they prepare you pretty well not to create records if you don't want them.
What did they say exactly?
There's like if you're worried about a record becoming a public record, then don't create one.
Meaning, how would you do that?
You just do everything by phone. So text messages. A lot of people don't realize that text messages, even though I don't have a county phone, my text messages are subject to an open record. So if I am talking to someone about something that I can vote on with them, then that immediately becomes a public record.
So the only way to avoid the public records request is to basically not create a record, and that's by doing things by phone. And not record the calls, I guess.
No, yeah, you don't. They definitely don't record calls.
Okay, well, on that note, I'm going to introduce our guest. This is Jason Leopold, and I think that we can go into a configuration here so that we can have a little bit more real estate with him. And There we go. Okay, so we can feature Jason. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into this, into being such an aggressive, well, I guess let's do this before we do that. So that we have a vocabulary. Sometimes people say FOIA, which is Freedom of Information Act. Sometimes people say FOIL, which is Freedom of Information legislation. And sometimes people say public records request or open records request is what the language that Benny was using. How are we best to, what are the terms, what do the different terms mean, and how are we best to use them?
Well, FOIA it depends on the state. Or federal. So the Freedom of Information Act is a federal piece of of legislation, the law. In Washington D.C. they use FOIA. Other states use FOIA. New York uses FOIL. That's how they identify public records. But it all falls under essentially public records requests. So it's just a different. Florida has the Sunshine Law, right? But it all means public records. So each state or on the federal level, we'll just refer to it as FOIA. If you say FOIA, I think it's universally understood that you're asking for, public records. You're seeking the release of records to the public.
Right. And how did you get into, I don't know, I know there was a kind of a complicated history of you becoming an investigative reporter, and maybe you can give us a few of those details. But how did you?
Sure, I'll give you the quick and dirty. A long time ago, many years ago, I had been reporting in the area of national security, and everything in the area of national security, by and large, is classified. So as a reporter, you're heavily dependent upon anonymous sources to provide you with information, with details about what's happening in the world of the military, of spies, of the FBI. And that can sometimes be problematic because, you are, in some ways, you're trusting your sources to provide you with accurate information. For me, it proved to be somewhat disastrous about 16 years ago when, a source provided me with information that just turned out to be wrong. And, in order to continue reporting on national security, I needed to find another way, a better way, a way that meant that I wasn't going to rely on, or at least rely heavily on anonymous sources. And honestly, at that point, it was an effort to build back my credibility as a reporter for getting the story wrong. So I turned to the Freedom of Information Act. And the Freedom of Information Act was this, fantastic half-century-old law that allows anyone, anywhere in the world, and I'm speaking about the Federal Freedom of Information Act, to ask the government for documents, for emails, for text messages, for reports, for talking points, for video, for pictures. So I use the Freedom of Information Act to pry loose information about in areas of national security, such as what was happening at Guantanamo, what was happening behind the scenes at CIA, what was the Defense Department up to, what was the Obama administration's drone wars look like, and even asking the Federal Election Commission, as an example, for a number of its records, or asking the Department of Homeland Security for its for the contents of certain records related to the 2016 election and its discussions with various secretaries of state. So, yes.
So now this is something that you and I talked about a little bit today, which is often these agencies aren't very compliant and it's hard to shake these documents loose. So have you had trouble actually getting them to comply and respond with the documents that you're asking for?
I always have problems getting them to comply. I mean, the reality is this, is that if you are using the Freedom of Information Act, it's crucial that you know a number of things before going into it. One, no matter where you are filing your Freedom of Information Act, whether it's on the federal level, whether it's on the state level, prepare for battle. Agencies and state and federal governments and local governments, in my experience, they are not ready and willing to just give up records. Sometimes they will try to thwart your efforts through exorbitant fees. Sometimes they will try to say that your request is too broad. There are a number of different ways in which agencies will try to do that. So it's crucial that, one, you read up on what the law says on the state and federal level. You become an expert at that, because it's not often that each agency, is an expert. I can tell you that on numerous occasions, agencies have tried to do this to me, thwarting my ability to gain access to records by violating the law or misinterpreting various sections of the law. And so I know the law. I know how to respond to this, and in an effort to try to speed the release of records.
And you told me that you have actually filed lawsuits.
I have filed more than 70 lawsuits at the state and federal level over the past 10 years. So it is something that I do, regularly. It is sometimes I do it because I need it for a story and I cannot wait. I do, if an agency is backlogged, and requesters and your and the listeners here, viewers, should understand that there are times when agencies are backlogged and it's sometimes impossible to just get records in a timely fashion. COVID has really contributed greatly to that, where initially agencies have essentially just kind of shut down their FOIA operations. So one, yes, you can go to court and seek the release of records, and I do that regularly, and it does happen quite a bit faster when you litigate. But it's very important that also that you understand when you're making the request is to try and identify the records that you're seeking. Try to think about it a bit more. I approach every Freedom of Information Act request as if I were approaching an investigative story. I try to find people, frankly, like Benny, who could perhaps advise me on what types of records exist, where are they stored, what would make a good request. These are things that each requester should try to do.
So this is really fascinating. So what you're saying here is that you don't just kind of go in blind. You try to make a connection, someone on the inside who can kind of guide you and say, I really think you want to be asking for this, this, and this. And that's a really important part of narrowing in, because sometimes you get, I know for myself, I've done public records requests and they're really broad and you get so many documents back that it's actually really time consuming to kind of like go through them.
Let me just give you a very good tip. So when you are requesting records at the state, federal, local level, make sure you ask the agencies to omit news clippings and press releases. The reason that you are getting a voluminous set of records is because they are throwing in every press release and every news article that comes through there. It's a great way to make you think that you're getting a lot of records. It also requires them to go through everything. So you tell them to omit it at the stage of your request. You'll see the process being sped up quite a bit.
So is this what omit news clippings and press releases? Is that?
Make sure that in your request you say that, because there's no need for you to have the agency process that, right? That's something that's publicly available. You're looking for information that is not publicly available. You want emails, you do want text messages. When it comes to elections, what I have seen over the past 5 years is an increase in the communication between state and federal authorities, if you will. The Department of Homeland Security, various components within the Department of Homeland Security communicating quite a bit with secretaries of state, whether it be about voting machines, the integrity of those systems, anything that may have to do with potential intrusions. So I'm trying to sort of capture a universe of records. so I can get a better understanding of what is happening, either, a week before an election or maybe 6 months before, how they are preparing, what the response would be. Yeah.
Give us an example there of, like, I know you told me that you did quite a few public records requests in regard to, like, the 2020 election. What public records requests did you do, and what type of information did you receive?
Sure. So, what did we see that was happening publicly? We saw that there were stories about the Postal Service and ballots and things that were happening that may have been nefarious in some cases. I tried to think about, what can I get from the Postal Service that would actually kind of shed light on that? Well, the Postal Service, along with every other federal government agency, and sometimes at the state and local level as well, there's an inspector general. An inspector general who's the internal watchdog that is supposed to investigate allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse, and whistleblower complaints. I requested from the inspector general reports, final reports related to the election in 2020, and what I got back was about 10 different reports across the country showing various postal carriers were investigated for throwing mail away, ballot-related mail, or excuse me, election-related mail, in some cases ballots, and campaign-related materials. There were investigations that were taking place into these individuals, into these postal carriers, that looked into their social media pages. In some cases, there was one case where there was a postal carrier who, they felt that what he was posting on his Facebook page in promoting the Republican Party and being critical of the Democratic Party may have, contributed to the reasons he was throwing away bulk mail, about campaigns. So that gave me some insight as to what was happening, for example, say in Philadelphia, because that's where it happened. I also asked for, at the Justice Department, in the Civil Rights Division, what they were doing, what they were investigating relating to Bill Barr's sort of, directive about, what was it, campaign fraud or voter fraud, what kind of tools. And by the way, I was doing it because I wanted to see exactly, we know that it didn't exist at the level that Bill Barr was talking about. So I wanted to see how he empowered attorneys general across the country to undertake these types of investigation, and if that contributed to sort of, suppressing the vote, if you will.
So what did you specifically request in that instance from Bill Barr?
In that instance, I requested any directives or emails he may have sent to the workforce, the attorneys general workforce, that mentions voter fraud. I came up with a number of different keywords. I looked through some speeches that he had given in the months prior, so I can find some of those keywords, and I would pull that out and include that in my request.
So keywords are a big kind of strategy. You think of keywords that may be used in the documents that you're looking for, and you ask for documents that include those keywords in the request. Right.
Exactly. Keywords are important, but they should. I always tell the agency, do not limit this search to simply just these keywords, because the agency is, responsible for finding, for locating records that are responsive to your request. The requester simply has to reasonably describe the records they are seeking. So, I have often seen requests where it says, I want every email from 2020 through the next 5 years. That's not a good request. It's a request that will be rejected. You should really, really identify the types of records you want. And by understanding the types of records you want, understand what types of records an agency may have. Maybe
So
they have, maybe they have emails, text messages, all of that.
I want to just dive in because we have a very limited time. We just have about 10 more minutes with Jason. And I want to actually share a specific public records request that I did and sort of find out what I did not get the information that I wanted. And I want to see sort of what your take on it may have been. So here's the records request, and I'll think I can blow this up full screen, so it might be a little bit easier to see. What I was interested in, and the reason why I was interested in this was because we did some data. This was a records request from Springfield, Massachusetts, and also did we do this for we did this for Springfield, Massachusetts, and I guess I actually want to show you the reason why before I show you this. So we did some analysis of the Massachusetts primary. And what we found, which is not that surprising, we found that Bernie Sanders performed much better in hand count towns than machine count towns. And just to explain that a little bit to people who may not be familiar with that, there are some towns in Massachusetts that count their ballots completely by hand. They don't have machines at all. And there's also towns in Massachusetts that use voting technology. And what you can see there, it's kind of small on the screen, but I think actually I could probably blow it up a little bit. Let's see if that blows it up. Pull it over. So the purple is the hand count, and the farthest one on the left is Biden's totals. And you can see in the hand count towns he did worse, and in the machine count towns Biden did better. And then Sanders was just the opposite. It's the columns next to you there, next to Biden there, that's Sanders. And in the hand count towns, the purple ones he did better, and the machine count towns he did worse. And then the third column is Elizabeth Warren, who also did better in the hand count towns. Now, this isn't anything conclusive, and people shouldn't like freak out about that and go like, oh, the machines are rigged. There are sometimes demographic reasons why this might happen. Those hand count towns are small towns, and they may just be the type of town that prefers a more progressive candidate like Sanders or Warren. So it wasn't necessarily something to freak out about, but we really did want to see the ballots themselves, and we wanted to look at data. And so we did this public records request in a particular town in Springfield where the data looked the most kind of suspect. And we asked for, we wanted all of the precinct level results. This is their response to us. It took a long time. We started in May, early May, and you can see this was in June. Mm-hmm. So that was already a month later. And they basically denied everything. We wanted to know the date of birth of voters, something they absolutely have. They said they would provide the responsive records as soon as they are available. They finally sent it in July after my calling over and over and over again. And then most of the things that we wanted the number of voters who voted in each precinct. They said the city doesn't utilize a sign-in sheet. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Huh. Everything in here was ridiculous. We wanted the number of ballots sent to the polling place. They said there were no records. We wanted the number of ballots of each style, like how many style of different ballots they had. That's for like the different precincts. They said there were no records. We asked for poll tapes, no records. Like everything that just on and on and on. They said no records, no records. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And now, is that the type of situation where you would have sued them?
Yes and no. So that's an interesting request. And, one, what you and listeners should be aware of is that you can request data sets. Data sets are subject to the Public Records Laws, Freedom of Information Act requests. So perhaps the agency had this information in a data set. And this is where a little bit of investigative work you'd have to sort of do is to find out how they are storing this information and what the data set is, where they would literally just give you the entire data set. However, there's also issues about in the state, and forgive me, I don't know about it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there are privacy issues. That is always going to be something that requesters will run into. As it relates to privacy issues. I don't know if date of birth is something that could just be thrown out there or whether they are, trying to protect some kind of privacy. But that said,
jump in there, Benny. Benny had a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Benny.
Yeah, so in Tennessee, the burden is on the petitioner. And most of the times that's where the law is usually usurped. You have somebody who doesn't really know the legal speak for it. So they're broad, and then they either scare you with the cost or say you're not being specific enough. It's going to be a jurisdiction by jurisdiction decision, but date of birth in Tennessee is part of a voter record. So you can get the date of birth, you can't get the social security number. So some of that stuff is delineated in state law in the exceptions piece. So generally, and at least for Tennessee, it says, well, I have something that says that our laws are just giving the broadest provision. It says courts are interpreted the provisions of the TRPRA broadly as to give the fullest possible public access to public records. So that's basically skewing it towards the citizen. However, that's the top line enumerated authority, and then there are exceptions within that, and people find their ways to reject requests in those exceptions. But most of the times, they're not the correct interpretation, from what I've learned.
Yeah, and I just want to note that the broad sort of swath of no records responses that you're getting there is suspicious to me. So right off the bat, I'm just seeing an agency simply rejecting everything, making no effort to sort of, either reach out to you and discuss it. And that is a red flag, because that to me is just like, we just need to, respond, right? We're going to respond to you. And so we're not in violation and just tell you no.
Yeah,
and we just have I'm sorry, we just have such limited time. He's just got 2 or 3 more minutes. So what is our course of action here? We would sue, we would do a more specific request. What would you suggest?
You have appeal rights. You can appeal it. Largely before you litigate, you do have to exercise, the appeal. And so you appeal the no records response. Essentially ask them to search again. And state that you believe that their denial is improper. And so I do that regularly. I'm constantly appealing. I'm appealing when I even receive records. So the next step after that is suing.
Okay. And then let's get one question in here from one of our viewers, Emily Stewart. She says, what is the best way to learn about FOIA laws? Is there a good source for anyone starting the process?
I'll give you 2 websites that are great for beginners to just learn about this. There is the National Freedom of Information Coalition, NF, as in Frank, OIC.org, I believe. And then FOIA, FOIA.gov. Now, the National Freedom of Information Coalition is great because there's also some templates that they make available there for each state. So the law is kind of built in to the template. You're under, section XXXX of the state's, public records law. You are requesting records for, X, Y, and Z. So that's a really, really helpful. Those are 2 very helpful, websites to sort of read up on freedom of information laws.
And give us that last one again. You said nfoic.org and FOIA.gov, and then you said another website.
If I did, I don't recall.
You said there was the Library of Letters. Was that at the FOIA.gov where they have the library?
At nfoic.org. The letters. Okay,
we got both of those on. Okay.
Templates are available there, and that should be helpful to requesters in terms of having a carefully crafted request.
Okay, well, I think we got you out of here by your deadline, which was 7:30.
Amazing.
I know you have very important stuff to get to. We're really, really grateful to have you here with us. And I encourage everybody to check out Jason's writing. It's really exciting. He's got a bunch of really exciting investigations going on right now, including one into the banks and the financial industry. If you check out his Twitter account, he's got a pinned thread there that has some pretty juicy dirt that they dug up on all of the banks.
Tennessee for you, Jason.
All right. Yes. We'll have to stay in touch, Benny. Thank you both. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. See if I
Bye.
can. Okay, bye. Whoa. I learned a lot there. I thought that was pretty interesting. Would you want to add to that, Benny, in terms of like?
This is awesome. Like he's really got me powering through this book. It's such a concise book that gives all county election officials what the lay of the land is, and you can see that there are so many ways you can weave into a provision of a law. And I think for your request, when I started looking, they probably took a top line provision and said, well, this particular record comes out of a system that's in the protections, and they did a broad brush and rejected everything else.
Yeah, I think I will go back and maybe you can work with me on it. I'm still very curious about those documents. Those election results were something that really never sat right with me.
Yeah, the other thing is there is an association. I know that when we were going through our bidding process, there was like an open records council, but it wasn't a Tennessee association. It was something else. And they were interpreting things the way that I was interpreting them. Even though our county government did not adhere to what they were saying, I remember another council. It wasn't our state council. It was another, like a group, another org. So I'm gonna look.
So that's federal council that was giving them advice.
Yeah, it was definitely some very different, because they were like from, I don't think they were even from Tennessee.
And we've got some questions here from Packy. He wanted to know about costs. So I can tell you from my experience what is and is not reasonable cost. So for example, I did a public records request in 2016 in Broward County, Florida. Benny's very familiar with this case. It had to do with Tim Canova, who was running for Congress, and we wanted to see the ballots in that case. We wanted to see all of the ballots. And initially when we put in the request, the county said it would cost us $80,000. That's 80 and then 3 zeros after it. And then we filed 3 separate public records requests, all of which they ignored basically, or said no to, and then, or put the kind of qualifications on it that made it meaningless. For example, they did say that we could come in and look at the ballots, but we couldn't have any photography. We couldn't photograph, we couldn't video, we couldn't document the procedure in any way, which we thought was kind of meaningless, because if we found something, we wanted documentation of it. And that was something that was fairly common that other counties were doing with public records requests. We spoke with Susan Pynchon, who had done a public records request in Volusia County, where they had allowed videotape. In fact, both they and the county had videotaped the event, so they had sort of like dueling cameras. But in Broward County, they said no to pretty much everything we asked for. So, and initially they said $80,000. So Tim got a lawyer and he sued, and I was an expert in that case. And after he sued, then the cost came down to about $4,000, from $80,000 down to $4,000, which was more reasonable to look at that volume of ballots. So it can vary, but you will have an idea of whether or not you're being stonewalled.
The state law says, and it's case by case, and most of these laws are very old. They're like 100-year-old laws, and they will say it's the cost of production, or they say not to exceed $25. I think there are some statutes in our open records that say it's capped at $25, even though it may take them $200 or $300 to do. So what they do is they say, well, we got 5 analysts that we have to pull onto this work 8 hours a day, and then they multiply the cost up and say it's going to take 7 days. And then they get these exorbitant costs, but sometimes it's just a stall tactic to say, I don't want to give you the data. They know a lot of people go away at the cost.
Packy's saying here, a small county wanted $350 for basic information. So I think you have to play it by ear. I think what we did, we got an attorney, and that with that pressure, the cost did come down, but then you also have to weigh the cost of getting an attorney. So maybe sometimes just working with somebody there at the county and saying, look, this is really exorbitant, and this is, in the public interest, and maybe you can, you can try to get some traction there. So I want to pivot now, and we're going to talk a little bit about fundraising, which is really important. I see in the comments that people are really enjoying this, and there's a comment, you folks rock, yay, thanks so much. Audit Elections USA also rocks, we love them. But if you want us to keep doing this work, then we really do need your support. We do have a fundraising drive going right now, and we are trying to raise $60,000 by the end of February. And it is kind of heavy lift, I will say, from our donors, from our donor base. It's definitely more than we've tried to raise in the past. And so there's a couple of things that you might be able to do to help us out. You might personally be able to make a donation. That's one thing, of course. And we have a donation page. No, it's not that one. So we have a donation page on our website, and all of the donations there are tax deductible. And other things that you might be able to do, you might be able to connect us with someone who you know is interested in donating to our type of project. So you might be able to connect us with a funder that has resources. You might be able to put a link to our donation page in your newsletter, or you might even reach out to your membership and say, hey, this is a really great group. They're doing great work. Does anybody want to hold a fundraiser for them? And connect us with people who might, want to support us in different ways. So we just want to put that out to you. You can become a tax deductible monthly subscriber. And we are saying right now, please give as much as you can. This is the time when we are really trying to get folks to help us out. So that's our fundraising pitch. And we really, really appreciate the people who have donated so far. We've had some amazing donations. And I have to say, when we get donations, whether it's $5 or $500 or even more, we are so incredibly grateful for the support that we're receiving. And we value every single contribution. We know that you put your trust in us when you do that, and we really take it seriously. So thanks so much for all of the donations that we've gotten so far. And then there's other ways that you can support us, of course, in terms of just getting the word out. So, and following us. So Benny usually takes this part.
I am at Benny J. Smith. We have comments below. We have our prior shows below. You can look in the links below.
Great, and I'll show you some of those links. We've made a playlist to make it easy for you to watch the past episodes, and that's a kind of a long link, but I think I can put that into the comments, and then you might be able to click on it. And as Benny said, also, it is down below. And so this is where you can watch past episodes. And we have some really good past episodes. I really encourage you to check them out. Last forum, we had an election clerk on, Tina Barton, and she talked about risk limiting audits. And we've had a session on HR1 already. We're going to have in 2 weeks another session on HR1. And what we're going to do at that session is we're going to talk about the critiques. What we're hearing, I think, in the progressive community is a lot of support. HR1, as many people may know, is for the People Act. And it is one of probably the most ambitious piece of election reform legislation in decades. But it's very important to know what the pushback is, whether that is from conservatives or from progressives like the Green Party, who are concerned about the matching funds level that they have to meet going up. What are the critiques and what are the responses to the critiques, so that when this dialogue goes on, you can know where you stand on these big bills. It's HR1 in the House and it's S1 in the Senate. So that's For the People Act. We're going to be talking about that in 2 weeks. That's Tuesday, February 23rd. So go ahead and make sure that you sign up for that. And then you can also just get the word out on social media about us. So you can follow us on Twitter. Oh, that's Facebook. I think I just accidentally deleted the Twitter one, but we're Twitter at @smart_elections. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok. We are on Instagram at Smart Elections. And you can follow us at like our pages. And one of the main things for you to be aware of is just that you're our PR machine. We don't really have a big PR firm. We don't have a lot of money. So we count on you to contact your family, friends, and networks and get the word out about it. So about our forum and the work that we're doing. So make sure you're signed up for 2 weeks from now, and please get that word out to all of your networks as well. So we're going to pivot next to what's happening in New York.
New York.
New York.
Yeah.
So, and let's just take a look at the comments and see if there's comments here that we want to put up. So Sheila's asking us, do we have a digital fundraising campaign? We are working on it. Yes, yes, yes. So we're making a video and we're going to have a campaign that charts our progress. And we hope to have that up within a week. We've been super busy, as some of you know. We just fought off this big voting machine company in New York from certifying a machine that experts say is very bad, called the Express Vote XL. So that is definitely coming your way. So we'll be working on that. And oh, we had another really great thing happen to us. We were featured in the Washington Post. Yeah. So I want to get you the link to that. What, Benny?
We were featured in depth.
We were featured.
And they covered smart elections and the work we do.
Absolutely. So here's our Washington Post article. I'm putting that link into the chat. Washington Post featured smart elections, and I'll go ahead. I think I can share that article so you can just kind of get a glimpse at it. It's pretty cool. They talked about the lawsuit that we were threatened with from ES&S, and it's really great. They are specifically noting that our organization is doing really evidence-based work as opposed to some of the other complaints about the voting machine companies. So let me put this up. This is our the article about us in the Washington Post. And they said, smart elections, a journalism and advocacy group. We were threatened by ES&S. So ES&S, which is the industry-leading private equity-owned voting machine vendor, ES&S, has seized on the moment to threaten members of Smart Elections, a journalism and advocacy group, with a lawsuit, which they did, and which was very intimidating. I will say it was unnerving to be threatened. Not only did they threaten Smart Elections, they threatened the directors personally, that they would sue us basically for every penny we had. So it was definitely unnerving. But what the article goes on to say is that Smart Elections is a collective of committed individual activists who translate academic research and relay it to state regulators. So they really supported our work, and they said nothing Smart Elections is saying is controversial, let alone libelous. The definitive research on electronic voting system incompetence is the annual report from Voting Village at DEF CON, where I've been 3 times actually. And what they point out is that DEF CON, the hackers have been pointing out many of these problems for years, the same problems that we're pointing out here. So it's really cool to be featured in the Washington Post, yay. And hope that you'll all check that out, put that in the links, and share that with your friends and networks. So let's talk about what was actually going on in New York that caused us to do that. We've been fighting against the Express Vote XL. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, Benny, and kind of what some of the problems are with it?
Yeah, so we've been covering it. I think me and you were in Netroots in Philadelphia, and I think that was around the time that they were dealing with the XL, the Express Vote XL. So we just call attention to what the vulnerabilities are. It's not really a take aim at ES&S or Dominion or Hart. Those are the 3 major players. There are other election vendors. Nonetheless, they carry the most significance because they cover most of the jurisdictions and states. So we have been calling out issues. We highlighted some of those issues. I think we did it again in Berkeley. And then we just took it home because Lulu is in New York. She's advocating. So it became more actionable advocacy, where you were doing like letter campaigns and writing those and just putting the pressure on, saying that the legislatures in New York need to be aware that people are looking at these types of things. And you do it with I forget the name of the news organization you did with, but you featured Dr. Appel, Professor Appel, where he talked about the Express Vote XL. He was talking about the Dominion ICE. So he really talked about a large number of things because those were for consideration in New York. And when you have that type of advocacy back with so many facts, then it's really hard to get in the way of it. So we were just literally highlighting and using the correct tools to pull the levers of the conscience of those electors who had to vote on that machinery, and it got to their ears the right way.
So yeah, so what's happened at this point, and thanks for that. We did. You're right. We did an entire feature on the Dominion ICE and the Express Vote XL, which are two hybrid voting machines. We featured Professor Andrew Appel and also Professor Rich DeMillo in those. And I'm going to throw up a letter now. Benny was talking about our advocacy here in New York. So here's where we're at with it. We're specifically fighting one particular machine in New York State, which is called the Express Vote XL. There are actually 4 hybrids on the market right now. The hybrid voting machines, many of you know this already, they combine a printer and a scanner in one unit. And because of that, they have a very flawed design that causes the paper ballot or summary card to go under the print head after the voter casts it. And we've fought this design in New York from the Express Vote XL. We succeeded at a huge victory on January 28th, and the New York State Board of Elections voted no. They are not going to certify that machine here in New York. So big win, but it's a temporary win because, as you know, as an election commissioner, Benny, the vendors can always come back again and again and again, and they will come back. And so what we are working on now is legislation in New York. And we really are looking for your help on this. So we've got a letter writing campaign going up, and I'm going to put that into the chat, and I'm going to show you that letter writing campaign. Many of you probably may have already sent this letter, but if you haven't sent the letter yet, now is a great time to send it. So this is the letter, and it's called a one-click letter. It's going to take you literally like 3 minutes, and I want you to okay, Emily, I'll get to that question. So I'm just going to put this link into the chat, send this letter, and you can send it yourself, and you can send it to all of your networks. You can post it on social media. This is a letter. You can see we sent 420 so far. This goes to all the New York State legislators, and it says either sponsor this bill, or if you've already sponsored this bill, then ask 3 colleagues to sponsor it. And the bill that we're talking about, it's called the Hybrid Ban Bill. And the number in New York is A1115 and S309. That's the number in the Assembly and in the Senate. And even if you don't live in New York, you can help us out. You can send these letters. The legislators notice when people from all across the country are saying, hey, this is a really bad idea to use hybrid voting machines. And it's a really good idea to ban them because it protects you. And what we're also encouraging people in other states to do is to start these campaigns in your own state. So you can take a look at that legislation, and there's a link to it in the letter. And we also have links to it on our website, and you can start to create legislation in your state that mirrors this legislation. You can use it as a template, and you can write your own anti-hybrid legislation, and we are happy to help you do that. So it's this particular piece of legislation is a very simple piece of legislation. It's literally like about 3 lines of text, and it basically prevents any voting machine that allows that paper ballot to have votes printed on it after the voter casts it. It bans any of those type of voting machines. And if you want to be in touch with us, then the best way to contact us is at our email address. That's contact@smartelections.us. And we are happy to help you get started on this path. It would be great if state after state after state started working on this legislation. Is it something, Benny, that you think that you guys might be able to do in Tennessee?
You know, I think our legislation prohibits certain types of machines. I don't think this one is even certified in Tennessee. I don't think it's for consideration.
Right. It might not be, but you still might want to prevent it from being
Right.
certified.
The legislative intent, I think, is why it was not offered here. So I actually need to check. But it wasn't about the printer passing. I just think I don't think we could have hybrid technologies here. I think we had to have either or. And that's
It's really, you know, that's so interesting because in New York, we looked at the statutes. There is no statute that covers hybrid voting machines. There's a DRE statute, that's direct record electronic, and there is also optical scan, which is the scanner with it, which is usually used with handmarked paper ballots. But that the ES&S is trying to have the Express Vote XL categorized as an optical scanner, if you can believe it. That is how they asked for it to be categorized.
Yeah. Ours is, you know, we passed the Tennessee Voter Confidence Act in 2008, and that was it was like a gut punch to take care of a lot of the election issues. Like they said, you can't have anything that connects to wireless of any sort. That is already in our state legislative bills. I don't know if because that component may be there that it's not, but I don't even think that one is certified.
And what was that called?
It's a Tennessee Voter Confidence Act. It's like Section 26 of our election law. So legislatively, it has already been a counter to newer. Once we went from not the OCR, we went from the optical scan to the digital scan. There were provisions that were placed inside. It's pretty good legislation. But still, I don't know about the hybrid piece, but I don't think it's certified in Tennessee.
It may not be. We found out that it is certified in California and it is certified in Texas, even though it's not in use in either of those states. So I know that we had advocates, including Jennifer Tanner and our legislative director, Jim Soper, who are now working on legislation in California to see if they can try to get these banned in California. So Emily had a question about what are the 4 systems. So what are the other 2 hybrids other than Express Vote XL and Dominion ICE? So the ES&S makes another system that they call Express Vote. And it's a very different system from the Express Vote XL. It's a standalone touchscreen machine, also prints with barcodes. It has a special feature that Andrew Appel calls permission to cheat. It's like a hybrid plus. It's a hybrid with extra bad security features, according to security experts. The permission to cheat feature is that if you want to, you can cast your ballot without ever looking at it. So the machine actually asks you, do you want to see your ballot? And then you can say yes or no. And if you say no, it actually asks you that question before it prints the summary card.
Reverse DRE. Right?
So if you say, no, I don't want to look at it, then it prints, if it's under the control of malware, whatever it wants. It already knows you're not going to look at the summary card.
It's basically a DRE function, which has been banned nearly everywhere.
Okay, so that's the Express Vote. And then the other one is the system in Los Angeles, which is called the Voting Solutions for All People, or the VSAP. Yeah. So both of the VSAP, we have information on our website. If you go to, let me see if I can pull this up for you.
That one's like a county specific one though, right? That was only, that's like a Los Angeles own.
It's in LA, but they certainly, I was told they are very interested in exporting it. So I'll show you how to find this information on our website. You go to smartelections.us and then you look for voting equipment. Here, voting equipment. Let's just make sure that I'm showing you that. Yeah, okay, so once you get to the homepage, go to voting equipment and then scroll all the way down and it'll say VSAP LA. And that's information about the LA system. And one of the things it has there that I know Emily was looking for is what she asked for was a schematic. And this is a schematic. It actually shows you, see if I can blow that up. It actually shows you the
print it.
Yeah, where the paper path is going. as it's sucked back into the machine after you cast your ballot, it goes right under that print head and then into the ballot box. So I think you can see that. It goes right under the print head and into the ballot box. That's the design flaw that the security experts are so concerned about. So let's just see if we have other questions going here.
While you read, for people who wonder why that's bad, the scanner goes in and then you print the ink dot on and then store it away. That's really bad.
It can change your vote.
Yeah.
It can, as Professor Appel has said, it can add, change, or delete votes when it goes through there. People have been asking me, how can it delete votes? And this is sort of the configuration. This is the way it could delete votes. So if you make your selections on the touch screen and then it prints a summary card, but instead of one of your selections, it might leave a blank space. You probably wouldn't notice it because there's probably, 12 other candidates on there and one of your candidates is missing, but you'll look and you'll see, okay, yeah, those are all the people I voted for, but you don't perhaps notice that there's a blank space. Now it goes back under the print head after you cast the ballot and it fills in that blank space, if it's under the control of malware, with whatever candidate the hacker wants. So that's how it could actually change your vote. You vote for one candidate and a different candidate gets printed. And we actually saw that happen in Pennsylvania, in Northampton County in 2019. There was a press release, a press conference that Allison Green tipped me off to. And it was the spokesperson from ES&S describing exactly what happened. The machine miscounted tens of thousands of votes. There was a candidate, a judge, who had received, I believe, around 25,000 votes, and the machine recorded that he had received about 154 votes. So about 20,000 votes missing. And what the ES&S spokesperson said in that press conference was the screen was correct, the paper ballots were correct, but the USB drives that recorded the votes were not correct. They did not record correctly. So that is exactly the situation that we're describing, where you think it looks okay, but it doesn't actually record your vote correctly. So we know that not only could that happen, it has happened with the Express Vote Excel.
Northampton said they wanted a refund.
They did not get one.
Yeah, but they asked for one.
As far as I know, they did not get one.
I know, but I know it alarmed them in such a way that they said, well, we don't want this software and we don't want this hardware and software.
There was 100% vote of no confidence from their board of elections after that in the ES&S Express Vote machine, but it did not help them. We haven't, trying to get to your questions here. Here's a question from Kelly. How can we change the machines? Could it be simply a matter of offering a better alternative, one that saves dollars and is unhackable? So there is no such thing as an unhackable computer. We know that they can all be hacked, but we do have better options.
Yeah, it's really process, procedure, paper ballots, preferably hand counted in public with high def cameras. But if we have to use the aid of computers, as long as we have the point of origin being a hand marked paper ballot, we can at least audit our way back to what actually the intent was.
That is what most security experts are recommending, is that most voters who are able, use hand-marked paper ballots, and then voters with disabilities will need ballot marking devices. There's two real security stipulations that we're putting forward based on security research for voters with disability who need a ballot marking device. We want to make sure that it's a non-tabulating ballot marking device. That means you don't want the machine to both count and print. Like if it's going to print your ballot, you take it to another machine to count. And that way, it's sort of like a self-driving car. If the car can steer and the car can fill itself up with gas and the car can turn itself on, it doesn't need you anymore. So you don't want the voting machine to be like that, where it can do everything. You want one voting machine that prints a ballot for voters with disabilities and another voting machine that scans the ballot. And then you want for the voting machine not to have this design flaw where the ballot or the summary card is passed under the print head. So
the thing I think you used to say, Lulu, is that they want the paper ballot to look the same, right?
Yes.
Virtually no distinction. They're not a special class of person. They use an assistive device to get the same thing that everybody else does. They want to be treated exactly the same.
Right. Voters with disabilities are adamant that they want their ballots to look like other people's ballots. Emily Stewart asking, how can it delete votes after you have checked them prior to being scanned into the machine? The thing about these systems with barcodes is that you don't know what it printed.
Yeah, you don't know what it counted. More importantly, and then you can delete a vote by overvoting it too. There are like 3 or 4 good ways to nullify a vote. So delete is an operative term, but there are other ways to cause a vote not to get counted. So ultimately, that's a deletion of a vote if it's not counted.
But it could literally, if you cast your vote and it prints one thing on your summary card, like it prints a vote for Trump and say you want to vote for Trump, but then when the machine actually prints the barcode, it doesn't print, the barcode doesn't vote for Trump. That vote would be deleted.
Yeah.
So
but operatively, delete key, wipe to white space. We're not necessarily saying that that's the method that's deleting it. There are many methods.
But your vote could go. Your vote could go away.
Right. Right.
Okay, so I think we've answered people's questions for the most part on this issue. I'm going to say again, please help us out. We really are trying to get this legislation passed in New York, and we have a meeting Fridays at noon. So if you're in New York, Fridays noon Eastern time, please come to our meeting, and you can sign up on the front page of our website for that meeting. Again, our website is smartelections.us, and it's really been a pleasure. I feel like I learned a lot this time, and it's great to have you with us. So as we said, register for the show, for the forum 2 weeks from today. That is on February 23rd, 7 p.m. We're going to be talking about For the People Act and the various critiques, conservative, progressive, and otherwise, and the defenses of those critiques. And as you know, this is what democracy looks like.
That's right.
All right. We'll see you back here soon.